Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Retrotainment. The last episode went really well with Niall. Good views on YouTube and good feedback from anyone that I've heard listening to it. So happy to hear that. So with those positive feedbacks, we said, well, may as well do episode 2 then, I suppose. If it had all been shit, would have had to the boss wouldn't have allowed that. So with that in mind, we've decided to bring on the captain of the ship here, the Dynamo, Ian Kelly. Welcome, bud. How are you doing?
Cheers, buddy. I like the way you have that awesome background of the three boys as well, and you just call me the captain of the ship. But that I will take that as the ultimate honor, considering what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, you're Quint for
yeah,
today.
and I'm Irish as well.
Yeah. Although hopefully by the end of this podcast you're in better shape than poor old Quint was, but by the end of the film.
Yeah. He went down fighting though. That's
well, he did. Matters. He always was going to, not a soft man.
Like a true Irishman.
Yeah, true Irishman, through and through he is.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here, man. I actually really enjoyed last week's episode. For anyone that's thinking that Ian is going to join on every podcast on the Dynamo Podcast Network, it's actually not true. I've actually been invited on this one. I mean, this was always going to happen considering it's a retro. It's a retro movie and retro anything basically podcast. So, I mean, me, Ted, and Niall, and a few of the lads have all kind of talked about this for a while, and Ted was the man to kind of steer the ship. And it's just a case of when the right film comes up, you bring the right guy for that film. Do you know what I mean? Last week, people that know me were probably saying, Jesus, Dynamo was made for the Karate Kid one, considering I'm such a big fan. But obviously circumstances being the New Year's and all, schedules weren't, they weren't able to allow it. But you guys did a great job. I thought I actually really enjoyed listening to it, because Karate Kid's a movie that I probably watch at least once or twice a year. The very same as this particular movie that we're going to talk about today. I probably watch this at least 3 or 4 times a year, and that's not even an exaggeration. I'm probably actually going easy there. It's probably even more. And I'm a Jaws guy, so I watch even the shitty ones. I watch all of them, but this is the Mecca. But I just wanted to give a shout out there to yourself, Ted, for doing a great job. Really enjoyed the first episode. Great feedback. People are enjoying it, both on audio, on all of the platforms, and of course on YouTube as well. So you knocked it out of the park there. And like I say, I won't be appearing on every show that the lads do. It's just sometimes they ask me to come on if there's a certain topic, and it's just the way it is, I suppose. The same way
you
guys
will probably. This was an important one to get you on, because like me and you have discussed this film before in the past and what genre it falls into. For me, this was back in the day, it was considered a horror film, whereas that maybe it doesn't fall into that genre now. People look at it more as a thriller or whatever. But we've said it ourselves in the past, like I still think this film has elicited more fears in people than a lot of other horror films, the likes of Freddy and Jason. Like, they might be scarier to watch, but they're not going to elicit that fear in someone. We both grew up on a seaside town, and we've both said it ourselves, the amount of people we know that refused flat out, would not get into the water, even as late into their 20s. I'm not getting in there. And you're like, well, that's not, our coast doesn't have sharks in it, lads. Like, you'd be fine. But just know, like, they've just had this fear, and some of them wouldn't even get in a swimming pool because they had this insane fear there could be. And obviously if there was a shark in a swimming pool, you'd bloody well see it, but it's just this
see it before.
It's just this fear that this film would have instilled in people.
I think so. I'd say you're on the money there. I think when you look back through history, I think The Exorcist and Jaws are probably the 2 movies that, when you look back on documentaries, more people walked out of the cinema or came out probably more terrified with these 2 films than any other film in history, in terms of horror. So I think it still does kind of fall under the horror genre, because it's just a scary concept. Like you said, it's a real shark, probably larger than most great white sharks, obviously made bigger for the movie, but it's a real threat in people's minds. You know what I mean? Same with the kind of Exorcist thing, that's kind of, you're dealing with the unknown. And I suppose you're dealing with the unknown when you're in the ocean swimming as well, because you don't know what's beneath you, like you said.
You can't see.
You can't see, no pun intended. And it's I would agree. I think this falls under both categories. People can make a case for it being a thriller. I would just say it's a horror / thriller.
Same as myself.
Sure.
It's probably my favorite horror film of all time. I just think that the way it was done, like filmed, and how they went about keeping it always entertaining and always up tempo, but also not oversaturating it with the shark as well. I think
we get into the mechanics. The mechanics of the shark obviously ended up being their biggest asset. The fact that it didn't work correctly, it meant that they couldn't use the shark as much as they originally wanted. So it's one of those kind of, at the time, Spielberg is probably cursing everybody, and probably wanting to get it, as much close to like Peter Benchley's book as possible, but it ended up working out. It ended up working out in their favor. It's one of those kind of things, isn't it? That kind of movie magic where, things just happen for a reason. It's organic, and it became the movie that we know it is now. It could have been a very different movie if we constantly seen the shark, especially if it looked hokey or anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it did work out better for him just to like, obviously on the day, I'm sure he felt that everything was against him and that he was never going to get this all done. But I think it did work out for the best from him. And I'd say if he looks back on it now, he's happier now that the shark didn't work as planned and that he had to readjust the way that he was going to film it. I suppose definitely. just for those who haven't cottoned on as to which film we're talking about with my background and talk of boats and sharks, it's Jaws, obviously. Came out in 1975, so we're going back before either of us were even being thought about.
Well before.
And again, this was released again. It's the summer film, so released in June 20th. So this is, again, like, you're taking a risk releasing a film like this, especially during the summer, because obviously people want to be going to the beaches and things. So
sure,
you take that risk of, am I going to get a bad reputation off the bat here for causing this fear of the beach? And then obviously people are like, oh, well, don't go see that before, like go enjoy your summer first. But it did well in the box offices again. I don't really judge films by box office or by ratings, but I always do think it is something that's worth having a look at. So it did $472 million in box office.
Nearly half a billion almost. Yeah.
And when you look back at the time that this came out, again, as we said, 1975.
That's huge.
Now, I don't know if these figures have been adjusted or not, but if that's not adjusted, that just shows how big this film was, to make that sort of money back in that day. And we all know Steven Spielberg now. He's a big name, big director. But as far as I can remember, this is probably the first big hit film he directed.
It was his first kind of huge one, like it was, because he was obviously kind of in the game, and he'd always been there. Like, he'd done some kind of short films in the 60s, but basically had three films before that. So this was basically his ticket, because even Close Encounters of the Third Kind, like, that came out 2 years after Jaws. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is the one that really kicked him into stardom, sort of in that circle.
And obviously he knew what worked as well, because as you can see, the three good-looking men behind you there in the background, Richard Dreyfuss there in the front with the glasses, he obviously went with him then 2 years later and did Close Encounters as well. So
he's obviously a good person to work for, because you wouldn't go and work for him again if he was terrible, I suppose.
Exactly, yeah.
Just talking of ratings, I always just looked them up just beforehand. So Rotten Tomato tends to be kind of the big one for people to go to. 98% from 90 critics. So that's pretty big, yeah. Yeah, huge rating there. Like, that's one or two bad ratings is all that's dragging that down.
And that's like, yeah, and Rotten Tomatoes, like I never judge on Rotten Tomatoes either, because they tend to be very kind of snobbery in their
Yeah,
reviews. They will look at films like Atonement and all these period drama movies and say that they're 10 out of 10, but they'll probably say Nightmare on Elm Street's a piece of shit. So I would agree with you there. It's horses for courses, but when you do get a rating like that out of 90 critics with a 98% success rating, that's huge for Rotten
yeah,
Tomatoes, because they nitpick everything, don't they?
yeah. And that's the only other good thing about Rotten Tomatoes is they separate both critic and just fan reviews. So the likes of me and you going in. So the audience review, which is just, I don't know how many people this is, could be up in the tens of thousands. I have no idea, but 90% as well. So you're still talking a high rating even from just, and like you've got to keep in mind that there's people maybe, who are 15 or 16 and who might have just seen this, and they'll mark it down based on the shark didn't look real. It's real grainy or something. Like they could mark it down based on those things because they don't understand what you had to deal with back in the 1970s, even 1980s, 1990s. Like they're used to this clean, crisp visual, and they're not going to get it from something like this.
And the funny thing is, it's still the most realistic looking shark in all of the Jaws series. They're still the most realistic looking sharks, because we had like Deep Blue Sea. That was a pile of shit. I mean, it was a good movie at the time just because of the narrative. It was hokey, but a mega shark, on steroids or whatever. But like shark movies still to this day have never been done. Like I know you and me. I've a few years on you, not too many, but we're both from the same ballpark in terms of the movies that we watch and that we were into. And even your T-shirt you're wearing, Jurassic Park. There's a lot to be said. And another Spielberg, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I always say Spielberg, but no, but it's there's a lot to be said. Again, everyone knows me. Anyone that doesn't know me knows I'm a crazy, crazy horror fan, as well as like all movies, but I'm a big, big horror freak. And my favorite movies are always the ones that have the animatronics. Do you know what I mean? And they're always the best. I mean, we look at Gremlins, for example, all of this. It's just so realistic looking. Do you know what I mean? When they try and CGI everything nowadays, it's not great. And actually, you probably noticed in some movies, they're starting to go back to animatronics, especially on the kind of lower budget films.
Yeah, well, they're cheaper as well, obviously. But I think, they are cheaper. But in certain scenarios, I think they do work out better. I think certain things just work better if they're not CGI'd in, because obviously
physically there.
You can act around it. Like Ian Mckellen, who's obviously been around a long, long time. I remember reading a quote from him about filming, was it Lord of the Rings or possibly The Hobbit? I think it might have been The Hobbit. When he played Gandalf in that, and he said he hated filming it because he wasn't on set with people. It was just him.
Yeah.
And a green screen behind him, and the chairs were set up, but nobody was in them. So there was no reacting to what was actually there in front of him. It was just doing his lines. And if you're meant to be shocked, you have to do your line and then be shocked. But there's no lines coming back at you either. So I think that just kind of shows it. Like CGI, just as great as CGI is, it's one, expensive, and two, maybe it just doesn't work for certain things. Like when you want to be reacting to a shark, if there's nothing there in front of you, it's very hard to try and give a reaction,
I'd agree with that, because it's from me being involved in like wrestling or anything like that, you're always trying to react to a real life person. Do you know what I mean? If you're told to just go and stand in a room and pretend that someone's coming at you, or pretend to show an emotion, I'd say it's quite difficult, unless like you're a method actor. If you're someone like a De Niro or Mickey Rourke or Marlon Brando, these guys can just rip it out of the bag and play an emotion, in an empty room or in a room full of 100 people looking into space. But not everyone is a method actor. So I see that point that Mckellen said. It's very true. Like a lot of these guys want to play off a certain emotion, and that emotion that you see on the screen with, between two people, or even, as you say, even if it was a real life, dinosaur in front of you, you want to kind of portray that fear so that you can see it in front of you. Or I suppose in Lord of the Rings case, like a orc or something like that. You know what I mean? If you're trying to show real fear, I'd say it's quite difficult. Yeah.
Well, it also just allows you to kind of, position yourself that bit better. If it's a CGI, you might not, like, they have to put markers on the ground, but you can't look down to look at, have I gone past my marker? Oh no, I haven't. I'm fine. If the object's physically in front of you, you're not going to walk over it, because it's physically there. So you can only get that close, or I'll need to back up or whatever. So I like to see the fact that animatronics are coming back, but I don't see it replacing. Like CGI will still be a big thing for a long time as well.
Oh, for sure.
Both,
Especially
I think a mix of both is going to be the way we see them going forward now.
Which is good, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so like it just looks like that this film gets a good rating all over from both critics and from fan audiences alike, both above the 90s. So that's, it shows it stands the test of time, which is always good to see.
Yeah.
So I suppose we'll get into discussing the actual film itself. So it starts out just two young, presumably college kids running on the beach.
Douchebags, yeah.
one guy chasing one girl.
Yeah. And she's not a douchebag. He's a douchebag. Yeah, she's okay.
Yeah, well, you have to, pay your respects to those who are dead. But
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, they are dead now. That's unfortunate. That's true.
She gets into the water, and he's too drunk to manage to follow her, which saves him, because had he gotten in as well, he's not getting away. But we're talking within 5 minutes of this film, dead, one gone, straight off the bat.
Yeah, and I think even I would also say, and I'm sure you'll agree with this. I know you'll agree with this. We may have spoken about this before. I mean, still, when I put that movie on, when the credits are rolling at the start, and you're looking through the eyes of the shark, just swimming around.
Yeah.
And the suspense of that music. I mean, that music is, the one thing we say about horror and thrillers is that when they get the music right, it really completes the film. And you're probably looking at about a good 20 to 30% of the film is based on music, especially in these movies. You know what I mean?
That suspense sound is so big to these. Yeah.
It's huge. Like, I mean, for example, like Halloween, every time you hear like,
yeah,
when there's a scene coming, that is so big. And same with the actual theme tune. But I think in Jaws, I mean, this is probably one of the most iconic, if not up in the top 3 most iconic kind of themes in movie history. Let's be real.
And what I think works really well for it is the slow build. Like, obviously you say in Halloween, but in Halloween it's just that distinct sound. Whereas this one, you've got the
builds.
So you've got that build. So you hear it the first time.
The
first time you hear it, you're kind of like, oh, this could be maybe there's nothing going to happen, because you hear it and then there's nothing. So you're like, oh, maybe I just imagined that bit. And then you hear it again and you're like, oh. So it kind of piques your interest. It keeps you.
It does, yeah.
But the kill that we see this early, you don't see the shark here. You just see her get dragged under, appear back up, and then get dragged under again. And then obviously her body is found washed up on the shore. But you don't see the shark itself. So you're obviously assuming shark.
That's what's scary about it.
Yeah,
that's what's scary about it. You know what I mean? You look at how many movies have you watched where like there's a monster or a ghost and you see too much of it, and it becomes irrelevant then, because I'm like, okay, well, I see him now, he's not as scary anymore. Whereas you see someone struggling for their life in the water, you're going, what in the name of good Lord is that, like? You know what I mean? So
yeah, and I think that was really smart. But this, as we say, that was probably more to do with pot luck that the animatronic didn't work itself at the start. But as we said, this works out better, because now you've seen the death within 5 minutes, so you're already sucked into the film. Sometimes films take a bit of a while to get into the meat and bones of what's going to be happening. This one's,
and her name, the poor lady's name at that summer beach party is Chrissy Watkins. For anybody that wants to try and correct us there, we know. But we've done our notes here.
She's killed quite quickly.
Very quickly,
obviously quite gruesomely, as we see later on, when not an autopsy but an investigation of her injuries is done. We see how people react, like they're sickened, but you never see the body either, which is obviously that's to do with keeping the parental guidance rating down as well. which is smart. It allows more people to go see your film. So,
well, it was still. I think it was still a 15s movie at the time.
I think so, yeah. But
it was.
I think if they showed the body, it would have been an 18s, so you'd lose that 15 to 18 demographic as well.
Yeah, this movie didn't need that. You know what I mean? I think you're right there. The movie didn't really need that. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So it's as I was saying, it's a nice quick start. So you're not sitting there waiting to see what happens. It's a quick start. So you're sucked in from the very beginning. But at no point do you know what you're dealing with straight away. Like,
no,
presuming a shark, and that's sort of confirmed when they get to the police station and he's typing up his report and he puts in shark attack, which he's then later has to correct on his police report because the mayor puts the squeeze on him.
Yeah.
Which just shows this is the way things were back then. This was
Mayor Larry Vaughan, he's a prick. Chief Brody.
It's going to cause us money. Yeah. It's going to cause us too much money if you say shark attack. No one will come and visit us. I mean, like, are human lives worth less than the money you're going to make on this seaside village? The mayor obviously thinks so, and he puts the squeeze on the doctor to say, "Oh, I was wrong. It wasn't a shark attack." And because the doctor's corrected it, now Chief Brody has to correct his one, and so now it's not a shark. Now she's drowned. I think they said she was hit by a boat. Is the medical reason given for her passing? But everyone, like, they all know that that's not true. It's just this.
Oh, of course. And then they try and kayfabe. Sorry, we won't use that word on this show. They try and pull the wool over everybody's eyes by catching a tiger shark. Of course, then they get a bounty killer and bounty hunter, should I say, and
loads of them to come in. Yeah,
and it's kind of it's one of those things. We're probably moving, away.
We've jumped ahead a little bit here, but yeah, it just
a little bit
the way the mayor looks at things. Yeah, anything will do if you can just kind of we've caught something that. And we can just blame it on that. That's fine.
Yeah, but it's a local fisherman. Sorry, that actually, says that he catches a tiger shark. But obviously, before that, we get our boy Quint, who comes in with he's offered 10 grand to kill it. Yeah, and I mean, 10 grand.
10 grand, nothing nowadays. They're just giving it to him now.
But I mean,
there you go.
In 10 grand wouldn't even get your leg back on you. So it's like, but back then, I mean, 1975, you're talking 10 grand's probably the equivalent of maybe, 50, 60 grand now. Yeah. Or, closer to the 100 grand. So, but it's obviously, they're still obviously the oceanographer is still looking at Chrissy's body as well. And they're still trying to get to the bottom of what they really think this is.
Yeah, it just shows what the mayor is like, though. It shows the corruption there, that he was more concerned about making money than he was about protecting people, because Brody's number one concern is we need to close the beach, and he's like, nope, that is not happening. Yeah. Nobody is closing that beach, which obviously leads to quite quickly within the next 10-15 minutes we see the second we see the second death, but there's two deaths here because the dog goes missing, obviously, in the ocean, which you don't see because,
Good. I want to believe that dog is still alive.
Personally. I like to think that dog just noticed the danger and just bolted, but we see the kid. The kid gets killed. And again, you don't see the shark, but this time you get to see the blood in the water, which you don't get to see with the first death. The first death, it's all underwater. You don't see any red blood up in the surface of the water, but this young child obviously gets killed.
Alex Kittner, and then his mother, of course, blames Brody.
I wish they'd gotten someone better to do that part, because when she's complaining to Brody about him knowing, it at no point do you feel sympathy for her.
No,
and that's strange. You should feel sympathy because this woman just lost her child, but she looks like she's, not to be bad, but she looks like she's in about her 70s, and you're kind of thinking, what? Maybe you should have just made this her grandkid, because that kid is like 7 or 8. Like, biologically, that is not her kid. Like,
like that's definitely, unless like she's part of some sort of swinger part of Amity somewhere in the town, and she's maybe it's possible. It's possible. We're looking at the dark side now.
I think she was a bad cast there, because I didn't feel any sympathy or emotion for her when she was doing this part where she was meant to be pulling at the heartstrings and saying, that's my child. You knew that this was a shark and you didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
You feel more sympathy for Brody because you're like, yeah, and he did want to do something about it, and the mayor said no. You feel more sympathy for the person that's getting blamed than you do for this person who's just lost their young child. So I think that's probably like one of my biggest gripes with the film, really, just that particular scene didn't really cause any hit, like any sort of emotional hit, which is unfortunate.
No, but I mean, we understand the narrative, like, and obviously we actually feel sorry for Brody here, because Brody's now taking the abuse, and he's getting blamed when it's obviously the mayor, and he's I mean, obviously with Hooper in there, like Hooper's almost on the same page as Brody. Brody just wants to get to the bottom of it, but Hooper really wants to get to the bottom of it because he's an oceanologist. And
I think this is about when he gets Hooper in, because it's after this little boy's death that they have the town meeting to decide whether they're going to stay open or if they're going to close for the summer, which they obviously decide staying open and closing the beach for one day to catch this shark, which is when they catch this tiger shark. Yeah.
But then Hooper finds what is a large tooth.
They go scuba diving, and Hooper wants to dissect this tiger shark to prove like this isn't the shark, because he's going to look at the stomach contents and go, this isn't. And the mayor again says no, because he's like, what if it is? Which I can understand that part on the mayor. Like, what if it was the shark that attacked the boy? The last thing you would want is to cut it open and the boy's body to come out. But you could still do it in private. But the mayor doesn't want that, because he knows that will allow a proof to come out that that they've caught the wrong shark. So then they go deep sea diving, which fair play to him, because he's gotten into a water that he actively believes there's still a big predator in. He just dives straight in, and he finds the big tooth, and then gets spooked by the dead body within the boat and drops it, which loses the evidence. So now they have no evidence to go back with, but they've confirmed their own suspicion of this is a big one, a great white.
Really smart piece of film there as well, to be fair, dropping the tooth and getting spooked by the dead body, because if he brings out the tooth, it's like, look, I'm going to find the dead body down there. Here's the tooth. By losing the tooth, he has to then convince the mayor, who doesn't want to hear anyway. But what you said there is so true. He has basically confirmed his own suspicion. So he knows categorically that there is a humongous great white shark swimming these waters, and he's certainly not going to go back down to rummage for that tooth again.
Yeah, and I think that's the great thing, is that you get spooked, but it's not because the predator itself shows up, because then you have to show the shark, which they don't want to do just yet. So you use this dead body, which would spook you if you were down there and this dead body just appears in this hole of a boat. That'd spook you enough to let go of that, and you're in the ocean, so it's just going to sink straight away, and you're going to want to get out, because you're going to be like, crap, there's a dead body here, I'm getting away from this. And he swims back up onto his boat, obviously terrified, which all of us would be,
as you would be.
So they drag the boat back in again. Mayor not hearing any of this. No, you're wrong, it's not a great white. We caught the shark. The shark is the shark's dead, forget about that. But then we have the big party where everyone's showed up for the 4th of July, obviously the big celebration for the Americans. Everyone's there, everyone's on the beach, but no one is getting into the water. Everyone's there, but there's no one in the water, and the mayor goes over to one of the people from the town, and he's like, get in the water. And your man's kind of like, oh, I just put some cream on, and I'm just gonna let it dry in before getting in the water, which just shows that he's timid as well. Like, he doesn't want to get in that water. Him and his family are like, we're not getting in there. Like, but the mayor again puts the screws to him. Get in that fucking water, essentially. Like, get in there, or I'm gonna ruin your business, essentially. So he gets up and he takes his wife and 2 kids kind of by the, or 3 kids kind of by the hands, and slowly makes his way to the water, and he gets in, and everything seems fine. So everyone else gets in. Great. Now everyone's in the water.
Monkey see, monkey do. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've been told earlier that what attracts the great white is the splashing that humans make when they're swimming. The only good thing about this is that Brody has been allowed to walk the beach himself to keep an eye on things, and he has loads of boats out with obviously sea marshals and things floating around to keep an eye for this shark just in case anything does happen. So they are taking some safety precautions, but still not really enough, like when you know categorically that you've got a great white shark swimming around eating people.
I mean, I guess in the back of your mind, you're hoping that the shark, got something and then he swam off somewhere else and he's not coming back. That's the hope. It's not like he has a gaff down at the bottom of the sea there and he's just waiting around Amity. You're hoping he swam off somewhere else. But again, that's why Brody is obviously there to double check, because he knows in his heart of hearts and he trusts Hooper, obviously.
Yeah, and Hooper's told him he's not going to stop until there's nothing to eat here.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can see his fear in that his oldest boy wants to get in with his little boat and all his mates and go around, and he's like, go over to the pond, which, it's not a pond. That's just obviously what they call this section.
It's the shallow area of the sea, of course, for the kids.
It's off to the side, and the kid says, I don't want to get in there. That's for the old grannies. And he's like, well, I don't care. Go in there. So it shows that he's not comfortable with letting his family in it, but he can't control, you can't control somebody else's family. So you just look out for your own one. And unfortunately, he's made the wrong decision. That the boy would have been safer in the main waters than the pool, as they call it, because that's where the shark goes off to. Not before being seen and then causing a stampede of everyone getting out of the water, which we see quite a few people get trampled and basically drowned. They don't explicitly say that anyone's died from this, but I think it's kind of implied that a couple of people...
Evidently, it looks that way.
Yeah, it looks like a couple of people have been knocked to the ground in the slightly shallower bits and just couldn't get their faces out of the water. But this is where we see the next death of some drunk guy.
Yeah. Kind
of just floating around in the pond. Gets torn to pieces. And Brody's kid goes into a state of shock, essentially. But gets dragged out with no injuries, luckily. And spends the night in the hospital.
Yeah.
And this is when we see the mayor finally realize how big a problem this actually is. And
the mayor himself is almost in a state of shock, he is.
He's in a state of shock, and they try to kind of get a bit of sympathy back for him here, where he's like, my kids were in the water too.
Yes.
You don't really feel much sympathy for him, because you're like, yeah, because you told them to. Like, dude, this is, it's not your fault, but you didn't do anything to prevent this.
I think you get a little bit of sympathy for him, just a tiny bit, when you watch it with older eyes, because you're going, right, he obviously just didn't really trust the source. He thought, right, this isn't a big thing. It's probably a once-off. Like I said earlier, probably thought he swam off. He's not coming back. The risk outweighs the
reward is big. Yeah, I think that's what it is. He doesn't want to believe. He wants to believe that this shark is gone. He doesn't want it to still be there. Doesn't want it to be a problem, and knows it's not something he's in control of.
Yeah.
But after this, he gives the big payday to Quint, 10,000. Ooh, big money, lads.
Big dollars.
Which it obviously is back then, but
hookers and cocaine money for old Quint.
Yeah, but we see where Quint lives, and we see the number of sharks that he has killed by all of the essentially skulls and teeth that he has in the shop. So we know he's skilled in what he's going to do.
Yeah.
but he wanted to go out alone. That was his original plan, was that he was going to go alone, nobody with him. Which it probably transpires was a good thing that he wasn't allowed to do that. That Hooper was like, nah, I'm coming, because no way Quint would have captured this bad boy solo.
No, not a hope. And that's saying, and we obviously, Quint and Hooper, obviously the dynamic between these two guys is great, obviously throughout the film, but you can see it here. They really don't like each other. Quint looks at Cooper as just some kind of college kid, you know what I mean, with a degree, and doesn't kind of look at him as a real kind of
man's man.
Yeah, as a man's man, or someone with boots on the ground, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a really, really interesting here that we see at the start how the relationship develops between Quint and Hooper. I just thought that's good to point out, because it goes throughout the film, and it's a really nice little side story throughout the film, I think.
Yeah, and Quint very much views it as you're looking at this as kind of like a leisurely thing. Oh, we'll go see the shark, because he has the cage and he's like, I'll be able to get into the water and see the shark. And Quint is like, no, it's a shark. You don't look at it, you kill it. Like, that's how he views it. He's just like, you just kill it. There's none of this looking at it and experimenting with it. Nope, it's kill or be killed as far as Quint's concerned. And he obviously looks at Hooper as that's not the way you're looking at this. You're looking at this as like a field trip. This is a mission, like, not a field trip.
Yeah. This is a bounty hunt, basically.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. It's 10 grand, and the agreement is that the two boys don't get any of the 10 grand. It's all going to be for Quint. That's the only reason he lets them come along, is that the money is all for him. Yeah, if they decide they want to come along, they want to come along. That's, their prerogative. So out they go on his little boat, the Orca. Now I don't know.
I love the name.
That's what I was gonna say. Now, I never noticed this, back when I watched it when I was a kid, because you wouldn't know. But now, when you look back at it with adult eyes, what hunts the great white shark? The orcas. Exactly. And that's what he's named his boat. And it's a very smart it's a very smart little Easter egg sort of thing that Spielberg's put in there.
It is. I really like it. Well, I think that was in the book as well.
Yeah.
So it's we'll give the credit, of course. We give the credit, obviously, to the book, which was, I mean, I think the book came out. I know, obviously, it was. This was what, 75? You said. Let me just check, because I'd like to 75. Get. I know Peter Benchley wrote the book. I just wanted to see what year it was that was written. I know there's probably people going 1971. There you go. 1971.
So it's not that much beforehand. So they obviously saw great potential in this.
It was actually published in 1974. There you go.
Oh, so this is how much stock Spielberg placed in this book. He obviously really saw something in it to take it from that quick to start filming. Because if it came out in 1975, it's not filmed in 2 days. A
year later, time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it takes time. The one thing I just want to jump back to that we kind of didn't mention there was in that death in the pool. That's the first time we actually see the shark.
Yeah.
And that's actually an hour into the film. So that's how long you're talking. This film is under 2 hours, so it's past the halfway point before we actually see the bad guy of the film, I suppose.
It's like, like it sounds like a slow build if you're saying it that way. So a lot of people that may never, I don't know if anybody hasn't seen Jaws, to be fair. If you're only a young guy or girl watching this and you've always thought of watching Jaws, do it, because it's not like it's a slow build and it's boring all the way up until this point. It's not. The fear is created within the characters and within the narrative that the characters are playing. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think it's a really good point to make there, actually, that we don't see him basically until an hour.
Yeah.
An hour in.
So more than halfway through the film is the first time we see the shark itself. But that's what I was saying, that even from the start, the first 5 minutes, you're brought in because he's killed his first victim, essentially. Yeah. In the terms of a horror, you've got your hunter or your villain and his victims, and the victims come fast and they come quick. But you don't get to see him.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's a real start. But Quint obviously brings them out, and he's his intention is just, we're going to kill this shark. But Hooper, the first time they come up to see the shark, Hooper has to tie something to the barrel. So the barrels are obviously there to stop the shark from diving back under, so that, you get 2 or 3 barrels in him, then you'll know where he is the entire time. It's easier to kill him,
You can follow him, exactly.
Yeah. Hooper's, they nearly mess up the first shot, which would have been a kill shot, because it's when the shark's coming at him with his mouth wide open. So Hooper's messing around here, trying to get this tracker locator tied to the barrel. Whereas if he'd just done as Quint asks, Quint's got a pretty much like a dead cert kill here, but he has to wait so long that it now just becomes a shot into kind of the side of the shark, and it just swims off. And it again shows the difference in the two characters. Hooper's more concerned with tracking, and he loves sharks, which he alludes to himself, but he's more concerned with the tracking and viewing of the shark than he is with the actual.
He wants to observe, obviously.
He
wants to observe his movements and its habits and stuff like that, so he can obviously learn from it, being an oceanologist. Whereas, as you said, like, Quint is basically a bounty hunter, and he gets paid to kill these bad boys, you know what I mean? And obviously we learn as we get depth with Quint later on that he obviously gives a shit about people dying as well. It's not so much, obvious that that's the case, but we see that he's a good man. Do you know what I mean?
From the start, he's painted as the kind of, I only give a shit about me sort of guy. And then it's as we get into the film, the big scene, I suppose we should go to it. Spielberg still says it's his favorite scene from the entire film. But Quint discussing his army days.
Yes. One of the most iconic movie scenes ever.
It's a great speech. Really well done.
Did you know that he was actually drunk on this one?
Oh, he's actually drunk when he's telling it.
Yeah,
does a good job remembering his lines anyway.
Yeah, it's a little caveat. Watching the making of Jaws, it's out there for people to see, I'm sure, on YouTube somewhere. I'd say you'd be interested in it, obviously. But basically, Quint had tried it a few times, earlier in the day, and like he hadn't, but he actually got pissed for this scene. The boys actually were pissed drunk for this scene.
Well, they do a good job in it.
Yeah, so they just went with it. A lot of it, apparently, was ad-libbed as well. Some of the stuff that was in that scene was ad-libbed. So the cameras were rolling on this, and they went, that's it. And it shows that some of the most organic stuff that we always talk about, a lot of the time is ad-libbed. It's basically the artist, or in this case, the actor, allowed kind of creative freedom.
Yeah.
Because
this wouldn't work in a CGI format, because if you don't have the guys there to react to what you're saying, you can't get this sort of realism, I suppose. I know it's not real because it's not what's actually happened to him, but he's living in the moment, like he's dived into the character.
And the thing about Quint as well is, like, when he's telling these stories, it's so believable because, like, Richard Dreyfuss was a badass in real life anyway, and you can tell by looking at him, he was a big enough man, and he looks, fairly handy.
It's the voice as well, handy. The gravelly voice as well, doesn't it? It really lends itself to it.
Yeah, they're coming at you with the arm down, and they're like, and this is what's great about it. It's like iconic characters in entertainment. We look at someone, I know it's probably off topic, but we look at someone like Jake the Snake Roberts. They speak very low and gravelly. So you actually find yourself, when you're listening to the scenes, that you're actually paying more attention because you're trying to understand what he's actually saying and what he's talking about. Because this, like, with a few beers on him and probably about 100 smokes, he's talking away, and he's like, and you're kind of going, what is this guy actually saying? Oh, now I get what he's saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just such a great scene. And of course, the singing the song together and all that as well. This is where you really see Hooper starting to have a bit of respect for Quint as well, I think. And we already know Brody does.
Yeah, they both kind of gain this respect for each other when you hear this story, because you can see why Quint has this kind of hatred sort of for sharks, because when he's telling the story, he does such a good job with this, because obviously, he could have just read his lines and it would have been, okay, it would have been fine. but he does such a good job where he pauses in all the right places to allow what he says to sink in, and to allow the emotion of what's happening. But he paints a really good picture of,
Sure.
we went down off the coast, and we were just surrounded by all these sharks.
Yeah.
So we just went back to back and just tried to hold them off. And then he paints the picture of when someone gets attacked, that you hear these high-pitched screams. It's not like oh, help, like, no, there's no manliness, no bravado being shown by these guys, because they know, like, this is them done. Like, you can't beat this thing. Like, this is a predator, a top of the range predator that's swimming
in his domain as well.
Like, you can't win this fight. And he says that I think 100 of them were out there and 32 come out, which I think is a really good little bit, because a lot of the times films go for that trope of, and I was the only one to get out. And I think, that'd be a bit much, because if you're the only one there and there's like 100 sharks around, like, how did you manage to be the only one to get out? So I think the idea of not making him...
were you, Aquaman? Like,
yeah, like, I think the idea of not making him this ultimate badass, I'm the only one to survive out of everyone, I think that was the right thing to do, to say that, a good few people survived. Like 32 of us survived. Like, that's nearly a third of the people survived. But it's still, 2/3 died.
But what's also great in that scene, and I think Richard Dreyfuss, like, he deserves all the credit in the world for that acting ability that he showed there as well, is that he actually showed fear as well. He showed vulnerability in when he's talking about it. So, like you say, he's not this ultimate badass that went in like Aquaman and just punched the shark in the fucking nose and, swam to shore, and he was,
still haunts him.
It haunts him, exactly. So he shows vulnerability, even though he's this tough alpha male character on land. He's saying, like, this is their domain, like, this is their territory. You know what I mean? And it's really nice. And I'd actually urge anybody just to even just go back and watch that scene, just to listen over again, and you'll kind of see what we mean by that. And the kind of, like I say, there's three things happening there. There's the narrative of what he's saying, and then secondly, you're seeing Quint show that little bit of vulnerability as well.
That he is human, still, like, it's not just a killer.
And then I think the third part is that you're seeing the bonding between the boys. This is like, right, we can work together now. Like, there's a without hugging each other, and like, we can actually bond over this story, and we'll all sing a song, and we'll shoot a few whiskeys or whatever. And it was really cool.
Yeah, and at this point they've gotten, I think it's still just the one attack they've had from the shark where they've shot the one shot at him. But he obviously comes back. But as they've gotten drunker and drunker, they've gotten louder and louder, and more rambunctious, and they're singing songs and stuff. So they don't hear the first initial kind of thunk, which I think it throws back really well to the first time that they encounter the shark. That both Hooper and Chief Brody don't recognize the small telltale sign that Quint does of the line moving.
Yeah.
So that when they're first there and everyone's sober and everyone's focused, the slight movement of that line, Quint's alert. He's like,
he's on the ball. Yeah.
He's like, it's here. But now that he's gotten drunk and that they're all being a bit merry, this shark hitting into the bottom of their boat and causing damage to their boat, none of them noticed it because they were all they felt safe, I suppose. Like, they felt safe in each other's company now, and they weren't trying to go each other up. They weren't trying to be like, I'm the better man. They were brothers now. And it let this safety get into them, which is probably something that Quint wouldn't really happen with Quint normally. And this bond was built originally by them showing the scars. Oh, I got this one from a shark attacking me, and I got this one from a burn, and this, that, and the other. And I think there's one bit here, and there's still a lot of discussion about it. I don't think it's ever really been brought up, but when they're discussing these scars, Hooper talks about, or sorry, not Hooper, I think it's Quint talks about the one on his leg that comes from the tiger shark tail whipping. And Brody reacts to this very quickly. He goes, tiger? And they go, yeah, it's a type of shark. But it's never discussed, but we know that Brody doesn't like the water. He has a fear of it, but he's always claimed it's to do with to do with drowning. But after the word tiger is mentioned, he picks up his top and looks down, and we see a scar here. Now, this is a real scar. It comes from the actor having his appendix removed. So some people believe, oh, the reason he did that is because he obviously just doesn't feel his scar is a big enough deal to discuss with these lads who are talking about being attacked by sharks and burnt from.
But if you look a bit deeper, though, the underlying story is that
some people think that it's to do with because he was a police officer before he moves down here, up in New York, and they think it's to do with him getting shot in New York, and they think that's the scar from it. But I don't think that's the case, because this is only something I looked at just after I noticed this. There is sharks in New York City. What type of sharks? Tiger sharks.
Tiger sharks.
And I looked to see if anyone else had, made this sort of connection, and had it ever been confirmed by Spielberg or by the writer of the book or anything what this scar was. And I genuinely haven't seen anybody discussing this. So
that's really interesting. It's really interesting.
Is this scar from a tiger shark's tail hitting him when he's a young child in the water?
You know what? I think we should go with that. I mean,
I think that's the idea, but it's never been discussed or confirmed. Because
if it is the idea as well, it's one of those genius moments as well. Do you know what I mean? Because, like you say, obviously the actor Roy Schneider actually plays that really well too.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, he does it so subtly, and he's like, these two motherfuckers are covered head to toe in scars, and I just got this little scar here.
But it shows that the hurt of the shark's still there, because he wasn't willing to tell them about this scar. So maybe it was just something easy, and he's just like, oh, I don't feel it's manly enough. But it could also be that there's still this fear of even discussing what happened to him as a child.
Yeah. No, that's a really good observation there. But yeah, like, I mean, obviously after this, it's kind of,
it builds up very quick after this now.
Very quick, yeah.
Yeah, so they're back out trying to hunt the shark, firing the harpoons with the barrels attached, and they finally get 3 attached. And Quint says, "No way, he's going back under with that now."
Yeah, because he harpoons him obviously with another barrel, like.
Yeah, so they eventually get 3, and he says, "There's no way he's going back under now." And then we see the shark pop up, and they finally realize the actual size of the shark. They're like, "This is a 25-footer. Like, this is a big boy."
Yeah.
But they realize that there's nothing they can do. The shark's attacked. It's destroyed the boat essentially. They realize that the harpoons are not getting the job done. So Quint asks Hooper, "You got any ideas?" Which, again, this shows at the start, Quint would never have asked for advice from this, this punk college kid. But now he's gained this respect, and he's like, "Okay, like, what have you got?" And they were like, "Well, the ship blows out because they're trying to lead the shark back to shallow waters to kill it." And
of course, yeah,
Quint is flooring it, and they keep telling them, like, "You're gonna burn it out, you're gonna burn it out," and he's just not listening. He's like, "I know what I'm doing," trying to show some of that, bravado again.
He's still also pissed as well. Let's be real.
He's still hammered. Yeah. But obviously he is wrong, so they're like, right, now we got to kill it before it kills us. And we've jumped past one of the most iconic lines, actually, "I think we're going to need a bigger boat."
Yes, which is actually Brody's line. I mean, it's just and I think his facial expression when he says it too, like, he does it in such a way where it sounds like a comedic line now. Yeah, and it kind of is a comedic line, but he says it with such fear in his face also,
Yeah, and he says that just as they realize how big the shark actually is.
Because this shark, like you said, he's a 25-footer. Like, it's not a normal great white shark. This is a huge bad boy. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
But they obviously go down, and Hooper goes down in the cage with the essentially poison on a stick. That the idea is that when the shark attacks, you can't get through the hide. So when the shark comes at the cage to bite it open, you jab it into his mouth, and that you can inject the poison that way. Good idea in theory. Doesn't really work out so well, because obviously the shark just tears through this cage, and it's
Mike
smart
Tyson
because
had
it doesn't just come
Mike
straight at
Tyson.
him. It comes behind him and circles him.
Yeah,
It's not just some dumb predator hunting. It's
I was kind of
smart.
thinking that's a good opportune line, because Mike Tyson always had that motto that everyone has a game plan until they get punched in the face. It's
That's
like
what this
everyone has
is.
a game plan until a shark comes at them in a cage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy, like.
Yeah, but the shark just destroys this cage and
Kills it. Yeah, yeah.
obviously in fear again. And this alludes back to earlier, the fear that Hooper feels when he's underwater, because obviously, you're underwater, so things are going to be that bit scarier. He drops it, and again, down to the bottom, same as the tooth. This one thing that, this dead cert, like this will kill him, and this proves it. Both things Hooper drops, and they float down to the floor of the ocean, and Hooper just, he's like, all right, I'm just going to go hide and just swim somewhere and hide in some rocks here, because I'm not facing that again. Fear, which is only understandable, it's a great white shark, a 25-foot great white shark attacking you, and you thought this cage would protect you? Nah, brud. This is just destroyed within seconds by this shark.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's such a tense moment. And
the two boys up on top have no idea what's going on. They're just panicking because they can see the cage, the pulley system for the cage rattling around. So they're just like, this isn't going well. Like, whoa, what are we going to do now? And they know the boat's fucked, so there's nothing they can do. They're just going to be sitting ducks now.
Yeah, yeah.
But obviously Hooper does get away and just goes and hides for a little bit, and they get the cage back up onto the boat. It's empty. It's been torn apart, and the shark is continuing to attack, and he jumps up onto the boat, crushes the back end of it, so it's now at a tilt, so everything's sliding towards him. So it's full panic stations now. Just throw whatever you've got at him and hope for the best. And
everything on the kitchen sink, yeah.
And unfortunately for Quint, that's where the story ends. He slides down, and as much as he kicks at the shark in the face and tries to help and poke at it with whatever objects he can find, when a predator like that gets at you, there's no saving you. And you hear the high-pitched scream from him that he's alluded to hearing so many times in his life, as the shark just tears through his body. And it's not slow either. Or sorry, it is slow. It's not like a quick just chomp. That's him gone, which the shark is obviously capable of. It's like
he's basically gnawing at him, and it's a torturous death. And to be honest with you, he goes out like a champ. It's actually one of those kind of scenes that you're like, oh shit, man. That, like, right when you're watching the film first as a kid, like, he's not necessarily your favorite character because you don't understand, everything, and you're kind of like, you're on Brody's kind of team,
Brody's the hero,
Brody's the hero, but realistically, like, this lad, was just going, right, I'm in the shark's mouth, I'm gonna fucking try everything I have still, but it's too little, too late, and
and it's a real slow death. This is the only real, all the other deaths are quick, they're just, well, they're quick, like, they're not brutal at the very least. This is the first brutal death scene where you see the shark bite his leg off and then bite into his body, but not clean through that it kills him. It's like tearing at him and ripping at him. This is quite a brutal death scene. We've seen way worse now, because obviously cinematics and CGI allow us to see worse now, and films like Saw have come out where things are way more brutal. But in the 70s, it's brutal. This is one of the most brutal things people have probably seen at the time. This is insane. But obviously, Brody has the idea. Then he's still trying to survive, so he's just throwing everything he can at the shark, and he eventually comes across the compressed air tank, the second compressed air tank that Hooper's brought along, and Hooper told him this thing will explode, and kill us if you don't be careful with it. So he says to himself, maybe the shark will bite into it and it'll just kaboom, and that'll at least kill the shark. Even if it kills me, probably a better way to go than what's happened to poor Quint there, to be fair. So he throws this canister at him, and the shark just the shark doesn't bite through it. Jaws doesn't bite through it. It's just kind of in his mouth, sort of. So it doesn't explode like he's expecting. So he has to go and hunt down the rifle gun.
Yeah.
Climbs up onto the
crow's nest
part of the boat, and he's like lying on it, waiting for the shark to surface. Which, you know, is obviously terrifying if you're in it, but it looks quite funny the way he's like lying on top of it, being like, "Come on!"
Yeah.
But obviously, eventually he fires a few shots off, and the final one does hit the gas canister, and that's the end of Jaws. There'll be no trophy to bring home, no proof that you killed it. Just
only memory. It's a fish dinner for the rest of the sea, but it's it's all she wrote for Big Jaws anyway.
Yeah, and at this point, Brody obviously thinks he's still the sole survivor, and he's stuck out in the middle of the ocean with no boat. And then Hooper swims back up, and they realize that, oh well, I suppose there's two of us, but you know, still no boat.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of stuck there celebrating, you know, their achievement. We did it. And then I think it dawns on them, okay, well, what now? Because we don't have a radio to anyone to come get us. What do we do? And I can't remember which one of them comes up with it, but they're just kind of like, if we just get on these barrels and just start swimming towards the shore, I suppose that's our best bet now. And there's a good little bit here where they talk to each other, and they're like, what day is it? Tuesday? Oh no, Wednesday. And I think that's good, because obviously they're a seaside town, so the idea here is that if they're discussing this, obviously the guys need to go out and catch fish in a seaside town, so they're obviously discussing, oh, maybe a boat will come out and will be saved. Mm-hmm. But also, they've been out, they have no idea what day it is anymore. They're still in shock, and you know, they've been out hunting this shark. They're not entirely sure what's going on.
And they've had monstrous amounts of alcohol in their system as well.
Yeah.
You know, that they've come down from. You know, that's probably sobered them up, but probably now having a bit of an effect on them too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that would sober you up, but like the effect isn't just gone either, as you say. Like, it is still going to be ticking away, just waiting for its time to creep back in.
Yeah.
But
well, I think they probably would have went for a cure directly back to Amity. I was about to say Amityville.
Yeah.
Directly back to Amity.
Yeah, I'd say once they got there, it was straight down to the local. All right, yeah.
Well, we probably needed to get Hooper's leg looked at as well. I'd
say he was happy to just go straight to the local first and have the leg second.
Straight to the pub, yeah. So no, it's such an amazing film. It's an amazing story. It's an amazing kind of piece of cinematic history. So many little nuances throughout the film as well, like you say. You know, the scene obviously in the boat with Quint is just, you know, one of the best. As I say, it's one of the best kind of pieces of dialogue between three guys in cinema history, in my opinion, anyway. And something that you only kind of appreciate the older you are, because as you say, when you're a kid watching it, you're just terrified and you want to see the shark.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, it's like you said, you know, we grew up in a seaside town, and my granddad had a great way of being a great little storyteller, like all the older kind of generation. They were great at limericks and stuff like that, you know. And he was like, oh yeah, like, you know, that happened on Bray Beach, so you have to be careful.
What a prick.
And I was like, what? I was like, nah, I ain't getting in that water ever.
Yeah.
I'll stay at the front. But I was the same. Yeah, I think everybody, as you say, it created a generation, and is still creating generations of people scared shitless to get in the water. So that shows how big a movie this is, and how good the movie was.
Yeah. Going back and watching it, it was one of the things that I said before on the first show at Niall, was that sometimes I fear when I go back and watch these kind of these old films for nostalgia. Like, I still have a nostalgic view of them, And I'm always afraid that if I go back and watch this, am I going to ruin that view for myself? Obviously, it doesn't really happen with the likes of Karate Kid, and it doesn't happen with this because, as I said, it's one of my favorite horrors. So I have gone back and watched it previously, but there's always that fear that one of these ones I'm going to go back and watch, and it's going to be not what I remember, and I'm just going to be like, this is not. Why did I like this so much? And why do I have such good memories?
It happens with Christmas movies sometimes, doesn't it? You know,
yeah,
like when you
sometimes
think
you're
of a
like,
Christmas movie.
why did I like this?
Yeah, like it's funny because like every year everyone goes back and watches Home Alone 1 and 2. And when you actually go back and watch them now as an adult, you're like, these guys are so fucking stupid. Like this is actually
Yeah.
And you're kind of laughing at, Harry and especially Marv. I mean, I think Marv is just so funny, especially in Home Alone 2. I know it's off subject. We'll probably do them closer to Christmas, I guess. But no, I think there are certain movies like that, aren't there, that you go back and you go, whoa, like this didn't age for me well. Like, whereas we can go back and watch Gremlins one time, and I'm sure if we do Gremlins ever...
we will be doing Gremlins at some point, all right, definitely.
I'd say I'll be at the top of the list for that one.
Yeah.
Back to the Future and Gremlins, guys. If Ted ever decides to do these movies, he knows exactly who he's calling first.
Oh, well, there's just so many of them, but yeah.
And Ghostbusters as well. I mean,
that will be done when the new one comes out, because that new film is obviously coming out where it's the new generations of Ghostbusters with the kid from Stranger Things in it.
Which is great.
It would already be out now if it wasn't for obviously this pandemic. COVID, yeah, course, but when that comes out, I'll be going back and doing a rewatch of the original Ghostbusters for sure.
Yeah, so you guys are going to see me on this a lot, and it's actually funny because this might upset a few people, but Ghostbusters 2 was actually the better film, which is crazy. So
they knew they kind of knew more what worked and what didn't work then at that time.
That could be one where we could cover both, maybe. Do you know what I mean? We could probably cover both.
We probably will, because they,
cool.
They're both very good. But yeah, this film, you go back and watch it, and it does still hold up, which
it does
shows how well it was directed, how well everything was done in it.
The acting, as you say, was fantastic,
top notch.
I mean, there was only probably the only kind of piece of bad acting sometimes was obviously Brody's wife and obviously that lady that lost the son. Brody's wife, I mean, she's not a great actor initially in the movie. She used to scare me as a kid. I used to think it was like it looked like a man or something, to be honest with you. But the older I got then, I was like, no, I actually appreciate her now and obviously she's in all the films that precede that as well. So you do kind of gain a love for her character.
She doesn't get much time in this film, to be fair. You don't really
No. But in Jaws 2 and 3...
Yeah, she gets a lot more in the later films.
She does. The four is pretty much all about her, like her and Michael Caine. I think it's number 4. But yeah, no, it's such a great... I'd agree with you. I think the storytelling is amazing. The panoramic kind of views and the cinematic views that Spielberg picked were just on the money. I think the acting and the dialogue within the film was absolutely perfect. The suspense from the movie. I mean, it is damn near a perfect film when you're looking in the thriller / horror realm, for sure.
Yeah, and for people who say they don't like, people who aren't into horror films, they don't like the jump scares and they don't like this. This is different. So, if you're not really into horrors, this is a good way to kind of ease yourself into them. If you're looking to try and start watching some horror films, because it's not the jump scares, it's not the panicky stuff that the other films might incite in you, but it does have elements of that in it. So this is still one of my all-time favorite films, and I'm glad that when I went back and watched it, that it still always holds up. I don't rate films or anything, but that's just how I look at films. Is would I watch that again? And for me, the answer is still yes on Jaws.
Well, that's a ditto with me, and I'm just glad that I'm the guy that you called, obviously, to kind of do this one, because, as I say, Jaws is a very kind of special film for me as well, because, like I mentioned, that was actually a cool little story. That was that was me and my granddad's film. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And like he passed when I was like 9 or something like that, so it was a good kind of. A lot of memories from my childhood. Yeah, great memory. And it was really cool when I went to Universal a couple of years ago. We were walking by and we were in Universal for Halloween Horror Nights. So We
Oh,
weren't really meant
nice.
to be just going around scanning the parks. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we went over, and where the Jaws ride used to be, there's only little remnants of it now because that
Yeah, it's gone.
stupid Harry Potter bloody took over it. But anyway, I digress. But they still had the iconic shark hanging upside down, hanging from the tail. And yeah, it was actually, and you can see there's still little bits from the Amity town that they used to have. You
Still
can
around. Yeah,
see
it's
the
really cool, isn't it?
It's really cool. So it was actually really funny. She actually started going, "Are you getting emotional there?" I was like, "Yeah." It was just one of
Yeah, I
them,
mean, it's you've got to tie back to it. That's not just the
Yeah,
film, it's a family relative as well that you've got that ties that film for you.
yeah, and I think it is a special film though in terms of, as you say, not just in that in its genre, as
Yeah,
you
in
said, it can
cinemacratic film like legacies, this is up there.
without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I think it's personally my favorite Spielberg film, which and he's got so many. So saying that is something, you know what I mean. He followed it up with a great movie afterwards, obviously with Close Encounters. But no, this was absolutely fantastic. As I say, it done the book justice. I'd actually recommend people read the book too if they ever want to.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good book. And yeah, like I say, 10 out of 10. I'm delighted to kind of take this little trip down memory lane and go retro on this movie.
Yeah, well, that's what this podcast is all about, and we'll wrap it up there. But thanks very much for coming on. And before we let you go, do you want to just give a little shout out to your own stuff? Just plug away there before we sign off.
Well, yeah, we're all on the same team. So obviously this podcast is brought to you exclusively by the Dynamo Podcast Network, which we are obviously available on YouTube because you're watching us. But we're also, if you're an audio guy or gal and you like listening to the audio of things and kind of just envisioning the movie, I suppose, in your own light while hearing people talk about it, we are obviously available on all podcast platforms. So like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever it may be. And we've got many shows now. We've obviously got the Four Podmen, which is a pro wrestling based show where, like this, we go back in time with four lads who are pretty clued into the wrestling world and just go back and look at different moments and periods or people in time within the world of pro wrestling. Obviously, my baby with Dynamos dozen. That is pretty doing pretty well at the moment. That's kind of what got me here. So that's going to be making its debut on YouTube next week. I believe this week, should I say? No, this is going to come out Monday, right? So it's going to be Monday when people are hearing this.
Yeah.
So yeah, this coming Friday, I will have the AEW/NWA superstar Thunder Rosa will be on the show. So she's a really big deal in the world of pro wrestling.
Repeat guest, just in case anyone didn't hear the first one.
Yeah, repeat guest, completely different interview as well. So
less
that's
tears.
really cool. So yeah, and then of course we obviously have we've got podcasts on pretty much everything. We've got the Upper Tier and the Over Under podcast as well, American football and Superior Comic Show with Peter, who does all the kind of graphics and stuff for us. I know you're doing your own graphic, which is pretty cool as well. I like this graphic. So that's Ted's a DIY man. I just don't have the skills to do that yet. And then
I'm sure Peter could have done it better than I did, but this is the sort of style I like, the real kind of
which is good. I like creativity.
Thing.
Yeah. And then we got what else have we got? We've obviously got obviously we've got the King Wo's Court, Carl King. If you like music and especially rock/heavy metal music, but any music, he does. He's doing some great stuff now as well. Interviewing some kind of local Irish talent at the moment. They go back and look at different albums, and kind of talk through big bands, discographies and stuff like that. And then myself and one of the singers from a band called Creep in Ireland, they're a pretty big deal at the moment, young up and coming band. Myself and himself are going to be doing a boxing podcast, which is going to start this week actually as well. And that's going to be called The Creeping Southpaw. So it's almost a homage to to his band's name, Creep. Even though I came up with the name, I didn't want the name Dynamo involved in it again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was going to he wanted to put something in like that, and I said, "What about the creeping southpaw? Because you know what, a creeping southpaw sounds scary, doesn't he? Because he's just waiting and then boom, you know." So
southpaw's always the dangerous one.
Oh yeah. So we have that coming up on the first episode. I think we're going to be talking about the potential fight between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. So all that and more, guys and girls. Thanks for listening. Sorry for hearing me bang on, but like, when you're on these shows, please give us a subscribe, a follow, and hit the bell notification so you might not be into all of the shows, but at least you'll get notification of when your favorite one does pop up. And be sure to just leave comments, leave suggestions. Even if you don't like it, just let us know and tell us what we can do better. So
yeah, well, that's the thing. We can't improve on something if we're not told what people want to see improved on. And as always, if you have any suggestions for films, TV shows, music, anything that you'd like us to cover on the show, do just comment it below, because if it is something that we can feasibly do a show on, that we'll definitely get one done. So that's it for this week. Good luck.